Welcome to the Sharing the Faith podcast, where every other week we explore the beauty and power of faith in Jesus Christ, the light of the world. Now here is your host, Dr. Tom Neal.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Tom Neal for another episode of Sharing the Faith, which is a production of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee. I am so grateful that you have joined me again today. And today, as I always say, my favorite thing is to have guests on here who can share the wisdom they have on some particular topic on the Catholic faith. And today, I am particularly excited to have Dr. Stephen Serafin here, who will talk to us about a very contemporary issue in our diocese, which is the introduction of what we call family-centered catechesis or family-centered faith formation. Dr. Serafin, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
It's terrific to have you. So I'll just give a little background here. So Dr. Stephen Serafin has been developing and implementing a family-centric approach to faith formation over the past 8 years. He currently is the executive director of Faith and Family Life Catholic Ministries, the creators of the Pathways Formation Suite. He also is the director of formation at his home parish, St. Vincent Martyr in Madison, New Jersey, where he leads an initiative called the Emmaus Coalition of Lifelong Formation. He has a great desire to build up and connect marriages and families at the parish level. He also graduated from Catholic University with a doctorate in ministry very recently, 2022, and he received a Master of Arts in Theology with a focus in evangelization and catechesis from the University of Notre Dame's ECHO program and a BA from Catholic University. So I met Dr. Stephen about a year and a half ago at a Pathways conference, which he'll talk about towards the end of the podcast today, about family catechesis, especially he talked about marriage, and I was sold. And I thought one day I want to have him on here to share his wisdom. So again, so grateful to have you on. Well, today we're going to share, Stephen, about family catechesis and related issues. And I guess my first comment is, as we introduce this in our parishes, this move from a more traditional model of catechesis or teaching the faith in parishes of parents bring their children to the parish, they drop them off at religious ed, their children stay there for a period of time or VBS in the summer, and then they pick them up and they bring them home. We're asking parishes and families to be more fully engaged parents in the process of their child's learning the faith. And there's a lot of uncertainty, maybe fear, et cetera. So would you just share a little bit from your experience over your career and your family life, why family-centered catechesis is not only compelling, but necessary in our church?
Yeah, most definitely. My dive into family-centered catechesis really began with Trisha and I's own marriage. And so we've been married for 10 years. About a year into that marriage, we realized that we had no idea. No one gave us a rule book of how to do this. We got married a little bit younger. I was 25, she was 24. So that's really young for New Jersey place, since most of my friends are getting married at 35. And trying to figure it out, we had intact families, we had people we could reach out to, but like really trying to figure out what are those skills and things that are necessary. And when we were looking around, we just found that there was really nothing secularly or within the church that really brought us into this. And so that began my sort of dive into this area and being like, why aren't we doing something post this great sacrament of how to actually live out this faith and be able to live out the graces you receive in marriage? And so in my work in that, one of the things that I began to realize is that that's when family life begins. Like, I think so often we think, okay, family life is when those kids show up, but no, like your family becomes a family in that exact moment when you say I do, right? And you commit to each other and you're willing to build up each other and have openness to that new life. And so what from there, what I began to understand was that the world at times can make us feel like we're in on this, we're in this on our own. And we have to figure this out on our own. And every single couple, every single young family that I talked to, I asked two things. I was like, who was ready for marriage when they first got married? And I've never had a person be like, yep, I knew exactly what I was doing. And the more fun one is like, who was ready for having kids when you first had your first kid? And everyone's like, I had no idea. Like luckily now in my generation, we have like YouTube and the internet and Amazon. And so we can like get by with a lot of stuff and a lot of information, but it becomes overwhelming of like, how are we supposed to do this? And I began to look further into the early church, and I began to realize like our setup of parish has drifted so far from that gospel image of what the early church was, right? The early church was this interconnected network of families who were there to support each other in the joys of celebrations of the things that they were doing, but then also in those hardships, in those times of supporting one another. And so I was really given a desire to, how do you create that network again so that people can come to parishes and feel like, hey, you know what, I am being served. This is a place that I want to be connected to and a part of, and I feel supported in that. Because even in the secular world, there's really nothing to really engage with as a young couple or as a young family trying to look at how to build out these skills, get through some of those sleepless nights, those struggles. And the church is the primary place that can be there in that time of support. And so that's, I think, where at the just like a personal level for me, I think we're desiring that. We're desiring that community. I think there's a fear because of the polarization that's out there. It's like, how do I get vulnerable and enter into this? Or I'm going to stay in my world. You're going to stay in your world. But every single time I have worked with marriages and I have worked with families, after a few different sessions of them coming together, that desire of wanting to share and realize that they're not alone on this journey of faith and this journey of life is what is that missing link to this, to the thing that they were looking for. And so I can get into all of the data. The data shows it as well. Is that right? That they say that we're in the loneliest generation on recorded history, right? And that's every generation. So it used to be, okay, hey, maybe like teenagers and our seniors were very lonely. But now it's across the board. We are all dealing with this loneliness because we're living on these islands and that we feel like we're the only ones that can reach. And we don't have that village that used to be there in the past. And so that's there. We've also seen that we've handed a lot of information about Jesus over, but we haven't actually put people on a process to build an intimate relationship with him and then give the actual skills and tools to live out a habit of faith. And so we've promoted a lot of like understanding and knowledge of the faith and less of okay, how is this a lived practice? And that's probably the most important thing that we have to do. And that's why this parent component is so key. No matter what, we are our kids' first witnesses of the faith. And so the church uses this understanding of like the parents are that primary teacher or the primary catechist. And if you want to overwhelm a parent, just say that. Like that's an easy way to just get people to be like, I cannot do that role. I have a doctorate in this, and there's days that I don't feel like I can do that role. But I think where we're getting at with that at a foundational level, we are our children's first encounter of God's love and unconditional love. They see our unconditional love for them and then are able to connect that to what God feels for them. We're their first witness and example of forgiveness and this unconditional forgiveness that we keep going back, no matter what they do and what they do can't affect that love that we have for them. We are also their first example of God's wrath and that experience of when we do get overwhelmed and we say the thing that we didn't mean to say, and then we have to seek their forgiveness. And so we get to show them that other side of forgiveness that way too. So I think as a church, I think we're getting there and getting to a point where we can truly help parents with this lived behavior. And I think that's what we're all longing for. And in the past, we just didn't really have the tools or the structure to do that.
So really interesting. The things you're saying, first of all, are foundational and fascinating, especially the point you made toward the end there. If you tell parents, most parents, that you're the primary catechist of your children, you're primarily responsible for the education of the faith, they'll freak out, they'll panic, they'll shut down, because I'm not a teacher. They'll say, I'm not a teacher. I don't know all the church's teachings. I'm not a theologian. So you're showing a little different perspective on that. We're not asking them to become teacher in the sense of holding a little classroom session in their home all regularly and testing them. So what is it that we're saying in the church that the parents are when they're catechists to their children?
So at a young age, right, they become that first witness. But then what we know is that what sustains faith is these continued conversations of faith in the home. It's in the lived experience. It's when they have the rough day at school. How is that being connected back to this? It's in the celebrations when we're showing that appreciation back and thanking God for whatever that great thing that happened. So it's not just on me. It's not me that's been the driver of this success, even if it's very small. So Martha, she's right. My daughter, 5-year-old, she just started a camp, and they won this game, and she was so excited that she won this game. But it's connecting that back to this idea that hey, you know what? God gives us these gifts to do that. And so I think most it's at the simple. It's the simple beginning and this witness that the parents are doing, and how they're showing these values and virtues to each other as spouses, and then to them. That's where this begins to develop. And then as the child gets older, it's these conversations that are taking place, and then having them reconnect back through conversation, and then also, most importantly, through the habits and practices. And what I find can be a struggle, especially for parents today, is that no one gives us the tools to do this, right? So most of us, like even if we went through pre-Cana and then did baptism prep, like those are like maybe a couple hours of sessions that we went through that predominantly probably focused on here's the structure of marriage and here's what the church teaches about baptism. But it didn't translate that to a bridge of, okay, hey, this is how you live out marital life, and this is what marital life's meant to do. Like this is why we have this entering into this godly relationship through the sacrament of baptism, and that you're now a part of this network of other people that are connected to this parish, but then also to the universal church. We don't really dive into those areas. We just sort of here's the basics of the sacrament. Here's what you need to know. This is what, or you go through like, this is what's going to happen during that day. And it less of the lived practice of the sacrament itself. So parents are really not given those tools. And then more importantly, they go after baptism, they probably go for 5 to 6 years with really no touch points to the church. And then they come in and they say, hey, we do 2 things. We say, this is supposed to be your primary community that you're a part of, when they've already connected to communities because they've been desiring that through 0 to 5 years old, or even post them or pre having kids. And then, so that's one way. And then we say, hey, we want you to have these conversations, but we give them no tools or like a process to build those skills that are necessary to have these conversations. And so that's what I find. I said that we don't just move to this model of family-centric catechesis and just say, hey, okay, we're going to have you do this. It really takes a process and a movement of these parents to be given the tools to do that. Like, how do they pray individually and as couples? How do they converse about that and do their own spiritual formation, so that they then can translate that to their kids. And so one of the big thing that really inspired me to just keep moving into this model and trying to support families better is that we know that we've only retained a small demographic of these families. Many have moved and gone to either different faiths, or they've just left religion altogether because they didn't feel like there was a support system that was there. And I think we need to bring back that intentionality of these parents knowing who they are, knowing their story, understanding that they're coming with this lived life, and then connecting that lived life to faith. In the past, we were able to just show them that faith concept, and then they would make that connection. But I find that that's not there anymore. You have to know their life, show them the faith concept, and then actually build a bridge and accompany them across that bridge to that. And so I think if we do that more, that anxiety will be less. And so, and I've heard it all. I've now been doing this for almost 8 years or so. And I had one parent come up to me, and he said, he's like, this is not my role. I don't know my faith. And how am I supposed to be this witness? And I said, this is the exact reason why we are making this change. I asked him, did you go through religious education growing up, CCD? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, did you get all your sacraments? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, I do not want your daughter going through the same exact experience with you later in life, having a family, and saying to that future leader of the church, saying that I don't know, I can't be this witness. And so my hope is that working with you, your daughter will raise a family and have the tools and skills necessary to then hand on the faith to that next generation.
Wow. That's a powerful thing, by the way, to say to someone. In other words, the deficit you find yourself in right now is the very thing that I know you don't want your daughter or your child to have, that your child you want your child to have the faith, and you want to show them what it looks like to be able to do that. So let me ask you this from a different perspective. That's the perspective of the parents, which is helpful, by the way. But you also are speaking from the perspective of the parish and parish catechetical leaders, the pastors, and so on. So what kind of adjustments or shifts in parish culture, structure do you see that your own work in your parish that you're in, or through pathways that have to happen for this to work?
Yeah. I think we have to remove some assumptions that we have. And I'm a culprit of this as well. I think there's been people in this working at this work, and it's not that what they were doing was wrong. What I feel has happened is that we just didn't have all the ingredients that were necessary for successful, fruitful formation to take place. And so I think it's also created a bunch of assumptions that are there. At times we could get discouraged, right? Or frustrated because that fruit has not been seen in all of the work, the tireless effort that priests and lay leaders have been putting into the church. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that's because there was this lack of not having all the ingredients, and that you could have the best lesson possible. And I've seen it in my own youth ministry and in my own formation. I've had such great relationships with kids and young adults, but that fell by the wayside when they were done with the program, because there's no one continuing that formation after the fact. And so I think the first thing we have to do is just sort of set our assumptions aside for a second. One of those big ones is that, hey, parents don't really care about this. And the reality is that you have a ton of parents that are there, and so they do care about this. They wouldn't be here if they weren't caring about it. And even those parents that aren't there, I find, do care about this. They just don't feel like there's an avenue for them to engage in the process, or that they feel so far out and that they don't have an experience of this. They can't do it. And so the number one thing I think we need in ministry is to foster more intentionality into it, right? Is to know the people we're serving. Just one example of this that I have in my parish here. And so I was working in a parish for the last 4 years. I transitioned to this role as the executive director, and then I'm helping my home diocese at my home parish implement pathways from the beginning again. But I had one parent reach out to me and let me know that she wanted to have a meeting. And we normally have these visits, we call them, at the beginning of each session. And she came in very distraught, and she told me that she really wants this for her kids, but she is right now going through a really rough custody agreement with her spouse. And she doesn't know her schedule and like when she's going to have them, how is this going to work? And she had been to other parishes before, and they were like, well, this is our schedule. This is when we meet. So you'd have to meet at this time. And I just threw the schedule out the door, and I just was like, hey, like, we're here. We're here to walk you through this. And however it's going to work, we're going to make it work. And because I know you want this for your family. And I think at times we try to put everyone into like a mass formative experience, and we can miss that individual. And so that one individual, I did this, and she ended up connecting me to these other families who are going through that exact same struggle. And so we were able to get them into a network of support with each other. And so that was one of my big wins this year, is just that if we didn't take that time, we would have never known that. And we would have tried to plug them into a system that probably didn't work for them schedule wise, that probably put more anxiety and stress on the situation, and a situation that she never even planned for. She never prepared. She never thought this was going to be a thing. So I think that's one area. I think intentionality. I think also looking at formation in stages. And so the church in almost every USCCB office has come up with a document that focuses on the catechumenal process. And so that's been our big thing. So when I was doing my doctorate for the marriage, my whole program follows the catechumenate. All of our resources at Faith and Family Life, Catholic Ministries, they all follow this catechumenal process. But it's realizing that there are certain things that need to be in place in a person's formation as a foundational element before they move to that next layer. And then you'll always be coming back. It's not just a linear movement. It's an ever developing of the base and then a continuing growing outward. Mm-hmm. And I think at times we don't do that. So in the traditional model, we have like 24 sessions. We talk about everything that's in the catechism, and we hit all those goals and objectives for whoever's in front of you. It doesn't matter where they are in faith. You're just giving them all the same information. In family faith formation, I think the traditional trend is at times to like pull everybody together. And what becomes challenging with that is now you're forming a youth and an adult, which is impossible to do at a beginning part of a journey, because an adult formation is so different than a child's type of formation.
Sure.
We'll talk about that
That's
in a
a good
second. And so what we have found is intentionality and then getting people in the right parts of the process become the way to fruitfulness in ministry is to do that. Then the last thing I will say is that the other part of this is that it takes a team to do it. It's impossible to really focus on family-centric catechesis as a parish and think me as a parish leader or just a pastor and a parish leader can handle the magnitude of that many people. And so one of the things we do heavily is in that first year, we onboard people to the experience, but we also say in tandem to this, we're going to try to build you out an accompaniment team to assist with the next stages of this, because as it grows and you see that fruitfulness, you're having more of those visits. You're trying to keep that same intentionality, but you can't do that if it's such a large group of people.
Sure, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And do you do just the teams? So you would be, for example, what's your title in the parish?
So I'm a director of formation here.
Director of formation, and then you form a team specifically to address this. And this would be families from what ages to what ages of children would the families span?
Yeah, so that's a great question too, and just this idea of like as we move towards this approach, and especially as we move confirmation to a younger age, is my core team really is there to help look at the life cycle of the parish and a life cycle of a parishioner, to say, okay, from marriage, how are we walking with that family continuously in some way throughout that process of formation and faith? How we set up formation right now is we make the destination the sacrament, and then we have nothing post the destination. And so I would say my core team right now, and that's the Emmaus Coalition that I've created here, that is different individuals who have their eyes on different sort of stages of life in the parish. And so we have a group of people looking at marriage, and then we have a group of people working with baptism. We have our family faith formation program. All of those are slightly interconnected though. So you have the marriage team is not just leading people to baptism, they're also assisting with the marriage enrichment experiences we're trying to do. And so we run the program I created, which is indoor, that it's on FFLCM. We do that once a year. What was that?
What's FFLCM?
So that's Faith and Family Life Catholic Ministries. That's the company.
Got it. All right, the name of your, got it.
And so I created this marriage experience and I connected it to the Faith and Family Life's resources. And so what we're hoping to do is really create this network of resources that plug these holes. But to do that, you need this team that actually can support that, right? So it doesn't just feel like, okay, hey, I'm the PCL, DRE, whatever the title is, Director of Formation, and I'm responsible for all of these different areas. It's impossible. You couldn't do that. But there are key people in parishes. So every single one on my team here is a volunteer who is helping out. And I just have a core leader for marriage. I have a core leader for baptism. They all oversee little teams. And this is just in 1 year we set this up, because there's people there that want this as well. And so you just have to engage them in that way. So I'd say that's one of the foundational teams we have. And then the other one is to actually run an event. We call them accompaniment teams. And then we say that there's like 5 roles there. That there's the facilitator, that's who running the session for the parents. Mm-hmm. There is a companion. And so what's really helpful is that a facilitator can't manage a whole room of parents. But if you put another parent who's in the program as a companion at the table, just to help with the conversation, stay connected to that group, post the conversation, like afterwards, it really helps create that network of support. We also say that a hospitality minister and logistics person is key. So how is that room set up? So it's not just like a bunch of rows and you're having parents come in. Like, how do you actually create this space into something that's beautiful? Like the church has used beauty to help people enter into and encounter God since the beginning of time. And so at times we can lose that because we've just had the structures of like school buildings and like gymnasiums and cafeterias. You can do a lot with very little resources to make that look more effective. We have the catechist role, which is those actually who are teaching the kids, right, and trying to echo that key message that's the parents are also learning. And then finally, which is probably the most important role, and I think we sometimes blow and put this role to the side is our intercessors, like somebody who's praying for the success of these families and the journey of these families. And what's amazing is that that's the thing that we don't really think about, but those people are already present in your parish. They're there. Just go to the daily mass, see who stays after the daily mass, and just start tapping them and just say, hey, like while you're here after mass, can you pray for the success of these families and the growth of this? And that's a game changer once you get them involved and you have this continuous daily prayer that's happening.
Yeah, that's incredible. And we'll talk about pathways specifically shortly, just to put some, some specific content to the name of the program. I want people to be aware of that. But it's, you mentioned school, taking it out of the school model of the military rows, of chairs of people. And there's an article I love to share around that's entitled Deschooling Religious Education, which is taking away this classroom, graduation, semester mentality and opening it out into a much kind of broader vision. And moving away from a content driven approach to faith formation, where it's just the conveying of content of doctrine or whatever, to forming a whole way of being and living, which is clearly what you're talking about here, the parish participating in it by embodying that the way the community lives and these people accompanying, for example, on your team and forming this almost family, but also helping parents to translate that into the home. So what does it look like for you as you build this in your parish and pathways in particular to build in the home a way of life and a way of living faith and witnessing, as you said? What does that look like?
Yeah. That's like the daily pursuit that's there. And I think one of the things that comes with that is, and what can get frustrating, and I think we can sometimes take this for granted as like leaders, we can lose sight of it, is that like I'm just reminded every day, because if I or at least every Sunday, that I bring my kids to mass, and Martha's doing better, but it's taken like a 3-year journey to get her to figure out, okay, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to listen, I'm going to engage. Philip is like an alligator and like just is spinning all the time, and we have to get up and move and walk with him. And my wife and I were at mass a few months ago, and we were having like 3 consecutive weeks of really rough masses. And what I found was, she turned to me, she was like, I get it. I get why parents just say, hey, you know what, we'll come back to this at a later time, because it's so exhaustive, because you're trying to form the habit and the skill. And then it gets even more exhausted if the only place that you're forming that habit and the skill is that 1 hour on a Sunday, right? And so where we've seen the development, especially in Martha, is that it's just these random little conversations, or the inquisitiveness that she has, that she's starting to ask things in the home, or how we put in little practices of prayer. And so my dad had surgery the other day, and she was the one who said, hey, can we pray for my dad? And at 5, but like that took years of her saying, I'm bored, I'm exhausted, I don't want to do this. And so I think for most families, like it gets discouraging of like there's no success here. Like why do we keep doing this? Why do we keep doing this? And so what I have found is this gradual stepping stone approach to just trying to do a little habit, and it might not land, and you're like, okay, but it is planting a seed that's going to be fruitful later. And so you try to set it up, doesn't work, fine. And you keep trying different things, then seeing, okay, what is sticking, what is working. And so this was a few years ago, probably about like 2 or 3 years ago. One of the things that we do with couples, my wife and I, and when we do our marriage experiences, is that the first skill we talk about is having a high and low conversation. And so with our kids, we add a thing to it. We do a high, low, and buffalo conversation, which is something funny. So that's there. But what ended up working for Martha, she would tell us that we were exhausted and bored, and like when she would go to bed, and she's like, I don't want to do this right now, or was this high and low and buffalo conversation. We then just attributed that to a prayer, and we just said, okay, well, it was a high with your day, and then we would have her then offer that high in gratitude and thankfulness to God. I was like, what was a low? And then you would have this low of she would then ask God for help with that low. And then she would thank God for the smile that was put on her face for the buffalo moment that's there. And so that worked. After trying multiple different things, that worked. And we were just like, okay, this is how we're going to build now from here. So I think it's finding what works for your kids, what type of skill is needed. The other thing that I find too is that what we're doing in formation, and this can be a challenge on the DRE side of this, is that we're not just forming in the educational mindset or the knowledge of faith. We are trying to form the whole human person. And I think that's what we're desiring too as parents. Like, we want to be formed holistically. And that starts with like a human formation. Like, there's skills that are necessary that I'm looking for, that other parents are looking for, that need to be sort of tilled and understood before we can actually plant the seed of what prayer is or what unconditional godly love is. And so I think that's where we begin in our own family life. And when I work with parents, is like, what are those skills that are necessary that need to be there? And if they're not there, maybe we got to start there and have a conversation and then begin to then talk about the gospel and the kerygma and eventually all the other aspects of the catechism. But sometimes it takes going into talking about like where they're at with, especially with parents, like what is love to them, because that's such a confusing and complex thing. And there's been a lot of mistrust there. Like, what does forgiveness look like for you? We all pull things from our family of origin. And so it's like trying to understand that in a person so that you can better help them and see, okay, where are those skills that are missing? And I think that can be a little intimidating because you're just now, as a leader of faith, you're also trying to form these like human skills that are needed as well.
Yeah, and I think so often, again, in traditional CCD, religious education models, that holistic approach, wasn't there. It was mostly focused on intellectual content, which is a necessary thing. You don't take the content out, but the forming of the whole person and the parents. It also is clearly you're saying that it's not just the child. You're also helping do human formation with the parents. That's right. How to be human in the image of God, and then how to be parents who are able to form children in the kind of habits that will make them good human beings capable of receiving the things that faith has to offer. So I want to kind of move towards the end of this time. We're having, to focus on pathways itself. So how does pathways, what is it, just briefly, and then how does it kind of lead parents and families through this process?
Yeah. Pathways comes from the resources from Faith and Family Life Catholic Ministries, and it's been this ever-growing development of a thing. We always say that this is it's a sort of like a sandbox of how to approach family-centric formation, because it's ever-growing, it's ever-developing, trying to build off of the fruits that we've been seeing and then the struggles of other parents that we've been seeing. And so we've created sort of a process based off the catechumenate that helps guide a parish and a family through a more family-centric approach and church-supported model of formation. And so, and that's when you look at the early church, that's how the church was set up, right? That the apostles would come in, they would form a community, they would give them the gospel, they would give them the formation, and then they would go to the next group. And then that community would be there to support each other and grow and keep learning and studying the scriptures and so on. And so we've created this model that really integrates formation all the way from the child up to the adult, so that you can foster an experience in one situation based on the family. And so our goal is to really accompany the family through this formative process, rather than try to individualize it and put it into like a grade level experience. And so it begins with, like, as I was saying, this visit experience where you get to know where that family is at. I would say the majority of families need a revisit of the core of the gospel, or we call that the kerygma, and sort of the lenses of faith. We call it, that's the creed of the first pillar of the catechism, and salvation history. And so I would say the majority of people who use pathways, they start there. They start with our Seek and Root resource. Seek gives them that foundational re-encounter. It's meant to be like a retreat for the parents. And then also the Root as the what's the proper ways to see faith? Because if you don't have the structure of faith, getting into the moral life, getting into sacramental life isn't going to make sense, because you need the sort of the bare bones of, okay, this is what we believe, and like the cores of what we believe. Throughout that whole beginning process as well, it's basically a mentor apprenticeship experience for the parents who are engaging. We also have adult ideas of this where you can form leaders to help form those parents, but just to focus specifically for families, it's what we like to say is that it's an accompaniment process that first at Seek is all these, it's just at church. It's just trying to give them the flow of what a faith conversation could look like. And so what they are experiencing, they don't realize this yet, but what they're experiencing at those Seek sessions are actually going to be the models of the stages of the box that they're going to be doing at home. And so there's a little opening prayer. There's a life check-in that brings in that human development that's there. There's an activity that takes place. There's a teaching. Then depending on the age level, there's either a further conversation or there's another tool or activity that pulls out the teaching from there. And then there's a closing prayer experience that takes place. All throughout Seek, the parents are given very basic little prayerful practices that they can start putting into play. So how do you bless your child, right? What are ways that we can offer up or ask God to help us with the struggles that we're doing and the forgiveness that we're doing? And so Seek does all of that. And then there's a transitional moment that happens with Root where we call that time is holy. And we begin to talk to families about taking this moment of pause, this time to that we don't really have Sabbath days anymore. We can't just dedicate a 24-hour day to just being with God, family, and community. And so how do we begin to teach our kids and even ourselves the skill of rest that God calls us to have? Because it is a skill. It's something that has to be built in. It doesn't just naturally happen. And it's actually what we're longing for. We don't want just another thing to do. And so one of the data that came out was that families now are spending 300% more time and being more active in their kids' lives than before. But the majority of that time is all structured. It's all like get the kid to the event or do this, watch the event. And so we are what we're hoping to do is to give them the skill of rest, to pause, and then slowly build on these conversations. So we start very slowly, and then after Root, they would go through a series of sessions. There's some formation that the parents receive. There's some formation that the children receiving, but a cycle sort of gets created that there is a session at church that preps the parents. There's a thing that the parent will do at home. Then they do this box together with their family. They come back. And then
I love the box, by the way. I've seen the box. It's
and it's really it makes the experience. What I find with the parents as well is that it's all there. Because like what's hard is that if it's not all there, like I'm busy, I'm running around, I don't have time to go run out and get like this activity thing or this thing. It's just it creates that experience. So it's very easy to enter into it. But what's really great is it's this rotation of like after they do that, they come back to the church, and then we're there to say, how did it go? Like, where were the struggles? What were the challenges? Where did your kid just be like, I'm done with this, and like run out the room? Like, what happened there? And then what's helpful is if you have those companions at the table, they can help really guide that conversation and then trickle that information back up to the leader that's there. And so, so that's there. After a family would do that, they would go into one of two categories. They would either enter into like the sacramental time in the family. And so we have resources for baptism, first communion, reconciliation, confirmation. And each of those, then something different happens. There's more family activities that are very much more experiential because we're trying to help the family as a whole understand that like God uses these tangible signs to signify something, right? Like, so God, that's what the sacraments are doing, right? He's using these very physical things to signify what he's doing to us when we get this grace of the sacrament. So it's helping the family to truly understand that, because I think we've lost that in our sacramental understanding, is that like, what is that sacramental imagination? Again, how do we open that and help them see like this is the reason God has given us baptism through water, confirmation through this fire and seal that's there, right? And that and communion through bread. Like why is he doing that? And so I find that that's helpful. And then the last stage is our longest one, which is this ongoing that just continues. And by the time that they're there, that focuses on the third and fourth pillar of the catechism, so the moral and spiritual life. That is heavily at home. There's support at the church, but the goal is that they're being put in intentional faith communities of other families, so that we now have split from parents and children meeting separately to now families as a village or a cohort coming together and journeying through this process and connecting to other parish things that are happening through that process. So it's not just they think, oh, I got to come to my faith formation session. It's, hey, you know what? We can go together as our village or our cohort to adoration or to confession or to the parish picnic. or we can go to mass and then go to breakfast with each other. But you begin to see this build of a network of intentional faith communities that are there. And we find that that's where the fruitfulness begins to really develop, because it takes this 1 hour a week that's happening on Sunday to this lived experience where faith is being talked on the sports field, faith is being talked at mass at a diner somewhere. And what's really important here is that by that time, the child is about to be in, say, 4th grade, 5th grade. Psychologically, something changes here in the child, where they stop looking at the parent as the primary formator, and they start to look for other adults that are that they compare their parents' worldview to. And what this allows is they start to see that, hey, you know what? Other people have the same faith. And like what? Then they start to ask questions like, why do they have this? Like, why are these other adults engaging this? And so the studies say that someone who's at the age of 12 or 13, they need like 5 credible witnesses of faith to really have that retained faith. And so that's what we're trying to establish on the formative level with that.
Oh, it's outstanding. It's such a helpful, by the way, you just did in like 12 minutes, an overview of what took us, I don't know how many days.
Yeah, 3
in
days.
that time we were together. I would have loved to have had that first. It would have helped me to give a little overview of pathway. So two questions. First of all, so if you're speaking to PCLs, right, parish catechetical leaders, DREs, faith formation directors, whatever they're called in a parish, who are beginning this process, not necessarily pathways, but they may, but of faith formation that is family-centered. And there's angst over this first shift and kind of explaining it to parents and kind of changing structures and patterns. What advice would you give at this initial phase of just, the kind of have courage, do not be afraid advice? What would you say?
Yeah. The number one thing I tell every parish leader using our resources or not is that the only reason I have seen the fruitfulness of this is that my spiritual director gave me the surrender novena, and to realize that it's not about us. If God wants this to happen, he's going to let it happen. And the more I've seen it is that the church as a whole, across, like in youth ministry, they came up with a document that said, this is the way. We have the new directory for catechesis. They say, this is the way. The marriage catechumenate was created 5 years ago, and everyone's saying this is the model, this is the approach. And when the Spirit wants something to be done, he does it in multiple different ways. And so I think that's a very key sign to say, hey, this is where we're supposed to go. So I think to realize that it's not on us, it's on, if the church and the Spirit wants this to happen, it'll happen. I think another key thing is getting your team on the same page is the first and foremost, is like making sure the pastor, and then not just the person running the kids' faith formation, but you are now pulling in adults. So is there an adult leader? Like, how can everyone get on the same page? So a lot of times we are just throwing different events out, but like, how do you pull everybody on that team that's focused on one common mission moving forward? I find this super helpful. And if you don't have that, how do you build that out through these volunteers? And they're there. I think at times the reason we don't think they're there is that we get up at mass and we make a big announcement and we say, hey, we need volunteers. And then no one responds to us. That's not how volunteers are made. Volunteers are made by building a relationship, understanding, knowing who that person is, and being, hey, like, I think you have a desire to support this group. Would you have an interest to do that? Just one quick caveat. That's how we found in my previous parish our head of our seniors program. I didn't have that in that life cycle structure. And I started to meet this person after mass. We had coffee a couple times. Her mom was looking for a greater support. And I was like, I would love to do more. I just don't have the time to do that. And she was just like, I think I could do that. And I was like, I think you could do that as well. And I was like, I'd support you through that. And she took it on and she built out a team. And now we have this really fruitful, successful adult program at that parish. So they're there. I think we just, again, it's putting that intentionality into it. So I think the next phase, after you get everybody on the same why, how do we begin to put intentionality back into ministry and know the people we're serving, know the people that we're trying to ask to help into this process? And then the further you expand that, the more effective it becomes. We have a lot of free stuff on our site as well that help with this transition, and it can be used really for any type of program that's trying to move to family-centric or catechumenate stuff. So we have a program we just did. This is what I've been using to onboard volunteers to this, parents to this. It's called the Shift session on our site. but it goes through, hey, like in a very we use this image of a plant, and basically it's this plant, this like adult plant in a very tiny pot. And then you have this other pot, which is the kid. And we start to say that like, this is what the faith life of the parents are right now. And we really have to sort of replant this into a bigger pot so it can provide nutrients to this little plant that's here as well. And so we help with an imagery there. There's some videos and stuff that are helpful there of just understanding like, okay, why is this parent role so key? And I think it really hits to this idea that we just want what's best for our kids, right? And so I think that's what we have to say is like, this is what's best, right? Like, I know it's different than what you've done, but all I'm trying to do is going to be something that's more effective than what was done for us as we grow up. And I think once you connect to that to parents, they're just like, oh, okay, like we'll do this. And then the last thing I would just say is just don't be afraid of failing at it, right? Like, it's like, you have to, like, we can just try something, and if it doesn't work, like I said at the beginning of this has literally been just a sandbox that we keep changing and tweaking and developing. Mm-hmm. And that's what it's got to be, because people are changing and developing all the time. And so something that might work one year might not work again. And so we have to keep looking at that and seeing what's effective there.
Excellent advice, by the way. Thank you so much for that. Very concise, gift of wisdom for the people who are listening. So where is that? So what's the website online resource you're talking about? How would they get there?
Sure. So the company is called Faith and Family Life Catholic Ministries. If you go to fflcm.org, so that's fflcm.org, that's our main site that's there. You can go hit the Pathways tab. You'll see all the different resources that are there. One, probably the easiest thing is if you hit there's a sign up, sign in button. If you hit sign up, I'll be able to get you and send you directly to like, hey, this is where you can look at these resources and find the shift session. I have like a little email that goes out for that. But you can always look through yourself. You just hit our shop and type shift, and it'll pop up, and it's a free document. The visit also is free. You can type in visit, that'll pop up as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and our big thing is, and so this is an odd thing. We're a nonprofit, and so our idea is we're not here to try to sell thousands of resources. Our main thing is like, how do we help parishes really move to this approach and feel that they're accompanied through the process. And so we will tell you to be intentional with your people, but the only reason I knew how to do this is Father Tim and Pam, who founded FFLCM, put the time in to get me confident in it. And so we do the same. And so we have our little small team, but then we also have people who have been doing this for years that are willing to reach out to you just because we've done it for them. They want to get back now to the next group of people trying to figure this all out. And if there's one thing that I could definitely leave you with is that we're not alone trying to figure this out. I get to work with people all over the country, internationally. We all want this, and we're all trying to figure it out, and we can add to that in the future. So.
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
And then if they want to get in touch with you, are you on the website?
Yeah, I'm on the website too. You can just go to the team there. My email's easy. It's just Stephen and then the website domain. So it's Stephen@fflcm.org. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, this has been really, I found this very enlightening, by the way, just to talk it through with you. So thank you so much for the gift of your time and your wisdom. And I'd like to ask at the end, as I ask sometimes for guests, to just close with a prayer for those that we've spoken about here.
Yeah, most definitely. So let's just begin in the name of the Father and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I think it's very appropriate that in today's reading, it's Moses doubting his call, and I think on all different avenues with this, whether you're a pastor, a parish leader, a parent, we can have an anxiety to us that we need to offer to God, because if we have that trust in God, and what God says to Moses is, "I'll be with you," and He says that multiple times throughout Scripture. He says that in the Great Commission, "I will be with you always." And so, just want to take a moment to thank God for being with us, for being on this journey, for being in our marriages, for being at the core of our family life, for being the destination and the way of life in which we would like to bring our families to, and to create a lifelong relationship with Him. And so we just ask God to be with our ministries, to be with our families, so that we can really see His presence in all the things that we do. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Stephen Serafin. It's been a great pleasure to be with you. And again, thank you for the wisdom you shared.
Thank you so much. It's been great to be here. And anything we can do to help, that's what we're here for. So.
Okay. And blessings on Patricia and Martha and Philip.
Yep, that's everybody. Great job. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, this has been another edition of Sharing the Faith, which is a production of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee. Our producer is Derek Diamond. As always, thank you to him for his excellence in all things. And we look forward to seeing you again next time in 2 weeks for another edition of this podcast. In the meantime, may God bless you.
Thank you for tuning in today to the Sharing the Faith podcast. If you would like to learn more about the podcast, visit ptdiocese.org/sharingthefaith. If you listen to the audio version through an app such as Apple Podcast, Spotify, or iHeartRadio, be sure to rate, review, and comment. If you watched on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe or leave a comment on the episode. Thank you for listening.